My name is Rick Haviott and I'm the Secretary of the ATCS. Mark has persuaded me to give a little bit of a talk about the show that we're running here today. This is our 4th annual show. Previous shows have been held in the country, but this time we decided to hold it in Sydney. And as Mark will have shown you in other shots, there are a total of about 45 display tables here today. My interest in telephones is fairly wide, but in today's exhibit I have concentrated on military communications, and I have telephones on this side and a few radios of World War I, and on the other side over here are World War II. The earliest of these goes back to 1907 and was used, of course, by the British and Australian forces in World War I. And in the World War II telephones, a lot of the people who were in the Second World War will recognise some of their old friends, such as the Freddie phone and other types of phones. In particular, on the radio side, this is a spy radio which was dropped behind enemy lines for sending information back to headquarters. And here's a Japanese radio which was simply used as a field radio. It had a transmitter with it, but unfortunately I don't have the transmitter. In more modern type of equipment, I have a sounder and Morse keys, which were used mainly by the post office, but they would also have found use in military applications.
My name is Hal Bayliss. I've been interested in telephones for 5 or 6 years. I started generally collecting any sort of old telephone, and eventually I got round to converting them to automatics for, you know, general purpose if people want them. To me it's just a hobby. I have British Ericsson, Stromberg Carlson, Western Electrics, candlestick type telephones, and I've been collecting these and doing them for about 4 or 5 years. I start off with a disc sander, and I sand the old surface off the box. But when I sand it off, I use various grades of quality of sand and grit until I come down to a final grit of about 240 that puts a final finish on the box, and then it is ready to stain and polish. Usually I stain them to bring out the grain in the timber, and then I don't polish them too highly, but I do apply the shellac with a spray gun, which to me is nice and easy and simple. It gets a little bit away from the way they really do them, but you know, it's just one of those things that suits me to do.
My name's Bob Mills and I'm the editor of the ATCS newsletter. I have a range here of Magneto or local battery telephones. Starting here in the right hand end, this is a British Ericsson which was made in 1927. This phone has been actually modified to allow for dial working, so a dial can be placed in here, or it can work as a common battery phone as well as a Magneto phone. These are a fairly common phone in New South Wales, but not as common in Victoria and other states. This phone is a Western Electric P-class, as it is known in the railways. It was used by the New South Wales Railways and went through a lot of modifications. This telephone is in very much original condition. It has 2 receivers, one on each side. The second receiver was used on bad lines so that the second operator could listen, or a first operator could have a receiver in each ear. This phone is a Stromberg Carlson, manufactured in America. These phones were used by the PMG department in Australia, but this particular example is from the New South Wales Fire Brigade. It too has a very large generator, and the parts otherwise are the same as for a normal Magneto phone. The last phone that we have here on the left is a Sears Roebuck. This phone is unique to America, and it wasn't used in Australia. And it was sold through a store catalogue, which Sears Roebuck are famous for. This phone is manufactured for Sears Roebuck by the Chicago Telephone Company, and it features a generator with teeth rather than the normal mill arrangement that's common in most telephones. The Magneto or local battery telephone makes use of a battery or batteries, and there's a selection of batteries here which are used to power the transmitter in the local telephone. These batteries were first the glass type cell, which had sal ammoniac in it. These were very prone to corrosion and needed to be topped up regularly. These then gave way to a square type dry cell, and then to the normal round dry cell, which we can still buy today. Magneto telephones operated off a switchboard, and a typical small country switchboard is this pyramid board, as it is known. It has 6 extensions, and the operator would simply place a plug into a jack to make a connection between 2 customers. The other telephones are the more common 400 type telephone, which is fairly modern by comparison with the other wooden telephones, and an American 1948 wartime special, or was brought out immediately after the war to overcome shortages brought about by the post-war boom.
I'm Ken Bushell, I'm the Membership Secretary for the ATCS. This is just part of our collection. These 2 twin box phones on the wall here were bought at auction in Sydney a few years ago. They came from a property in Warren in New South Wales, and the owners that auctioned them told us that they were in the same building and connected to totally different exchanges, which is most unusual. On the twin box, they used a Honeycomb transmitter, which is this one here, and you'll notice that the screws are all sealed with wire, so people can't undo them and fiddle with them. The receiver is what they call an outside terminal receiver. It has exposed terminals on the top where the wires connect. They did away with it on the later models where they ran the wires down through the centre. These things created a lot of problems. The inside of the top box has the generator for calling, and this is the bell mechanism up here, operates the clapper on the bells. These are very early examples, they're around the late 1890s. The bottom box down here, the only use for that was to hold the writing slope and to put the batteries in. That's one reason all these phones are so big. They usually had 2 fairly large batteries to operate the transmitters. This one here people will recognise as probably the most common phone used in Australia in the early days. It's the Commonwealth. This model is the 1903. They did vary them later on by taking the wooden panel off here. Underneath it there's a couple of modern plastic phones which are becoming very collectible because they make one run of them and that's all they do. Down on the front we have a replica of the telephone that Alexander Graham Bell actually used for the first recorded conversation. This replica was made in Sydney in the 1930s by apprentices at STC. That goes back to 1875, 1876. And alongside it, there is 2 very rare Siemens and Halsky phones, which were designed in 1879 in Europe, based on Bell's first receiver. These telephones, they were connected point to point, and to use them, they were used as a transmitter and receiver, and what you did, you actually talked into it and then put it up to your ear to listen to the answer. To call with them, they actually inserted a whistle into the hole in the front, and you had to blow in it and it whistled through the phone on the other end. So they had to be fairly close to the operator. Fairly primitive, but these ones actually still work. And we know of 4 others in Australia, so they're very, very rare.
Yeah, Chris and I, we collected this phone. It's all of them, they are rare, and nobody else got this collection. Just Chris, and all this one, and you know. Well, I've been collecting. I'm interested in anything old. Actually, that's why I start collecting things, and I recommend anybody collecting. You know, because it's a beautiful hobby, and especially if you restore it as well, it's more interesting.
I'm a young collector, and my dad started me collecting telephones and things around it. I'm pretty motivated within the collection and interested. I help him restore the equipment. The best thing about it, there's a lot of phones around here and a lot of collectors. I've enjoyed it so far.
My name is Bill Richards. I'm Vice President of the Antique Sound Society, and we collect phonographs and gramophones. I have a small selection here. The first one is an Edison standard model, circa 1908 to 1910. It was the most common machine produced by the Edison Works. It plays 2-minute cylinders, but it has an attachment to enable it to play 4-minute cylinders. Moving along, I have a Columbia, which is a very similar machine in all respects to the Edison, but it only plays a 2-minute cylinder. It has what is called the lyre reproducer. This is a witch's hat, which is the standard horn that was supplied with all machines about the same time. There's a small Columbia, which is a Model Q. It's a very early machine, 1903, plays a 2-minute cylinder only. This is a red gem, highly collectible. It's the only coloured machine that the Edison Works put out. It plays 2-minute, 4-minute cylinders, and this is a red petal horn. I have a collection of gramophone needles, a various collection of other makes in this larger container. This one is a Columbia. It's a graphanola, about 1924, with louvers to adjust the volume of sound. We have a HMV Model 102 portable. It was one of the last produced about 1952-53. This is a Decca machine with a reflex horn that throws the sound back out to you. A small English gramophone and a kiddie's toy gramophone which plays small records of the same size as that. This machine isn't mine, but it is a reproduction of a Playola machine, and it was made in India. All these machines are original and mostly in very good condition.
Hi, I'm John Nichols. As you see, I'm a phone collector, one of the many in our club. I've got a few phones here today for our display, but there are a lot more which aren't as interesting as these. I've got some black phones across here. This one here is a Ericsson, and these are Federal. They're all from New Zealand, not used in Australia, but they're very interesting, and that's the only style that were made. This phone is the first automatic phone we use in Australia in Geelong. This one is an interesting phone that when you want to service it, you just drop all the doors on hinges. They are a nuisance of a phone when you have these type of batteries, because they spill and they are not very reliable. But at the time they were the most successful. This one here is a little bit different. It has an extension off it, and a little ring indicator which will tell you when somebody's ringing, and you press a button to speak to them. Some of these things are biscuit boxes and they become money boxes later on. I haven't eaten the biscuits yet, but I'll get around to that. This little one is a better money box, the best of the lot because you can easily retrieve your coins. In the early days when phones were around, they were considered very intruding devices, and they were ugly in their terms. So they had dolls that were made that would cover up the ugly telephone. So they just hide their telephone in a concealed manner. I also collect 9.5 movie equipment, which is out of date now, but they have many handheld projectors. You must imagine that you've got to be very close to the screen, and only half a dozen people could look at them. They're all in black and white. There are a lot more interesting telephones available, and I'm still looking for them. Maybe I'll find them at other doos like this around the country. Thank you.
My name's Terry Orcher. I'm up here from Melbourne. I've been collecting phones for about 6 years now. My main interest in phones is now heading towards these type of table phones. The harder ones to get naturally are harder to find, but basically to collect phones nowadays you've got to get out and about, you've got to travel to the fairs, you've got to door knock because they just won't come to you. This is just a small range of table phones consisting basically of the Ericsson and Western Electric models. It's got the Ericsson 4 terminal, 5 terminal, the Ericsson phone from Hungary. This phone's quite rare in Australia. It's the only model we know of. The phone over there is the British Post Office number 16, or the 6 terminal phone, used predominantly in the UK. Several have found their way here to Australia. In the centre at the back we have the British Western Electric Eiffel Tower, which is quite an ornate phone. A lot of those got damaged because the legs are weak and got broken. And on either end we have replicas of the Ericsson swing arm, the dual receiver and the single receiver. These fairs in Sydney are all good for collecting.
Right, my name's Jeff Clark. I've been collecting telephones for probably about 30 years. In the last 5 years I joined the Sydney Telephone Collectors Club, and we've been coming up to this fair, and as a result of that my collection has again increased through horse trading, buying and selling and swapping at fairs, and also the auctions within the Melbourne group as well. But the swing arm skeleton has been a piece that I was hoping to acquire for probably the last 10 years. Through talking to people around the world, I was unable to locate any other than a couple in museums in Sweden, which obviously weren't available. So Terry Orcher and myself reproduced a swing arm Ericsson so as that now we have a pair in both our collections. This is the phone actually in front of me. The bottom of the swing arm Ericsson is a standard skeleton which we've refurbished, and then we have rebuilt the above swing arm, including the receivers, because the receivers were not available. And as a result, after trying to locate one of these right around the world, this was the next best thing.
Yeah, I'm Laurie Mangleson. I've been collecting telephones for about 17 years. There's ones down here out of my collection. These are all bits and pieces I've had left over from phones I've started and haven't finished. I've brought them along here today to swap or sell, try and get for some other bits and pieces for other phones I'm restoring, and it's been very good today. I've picked up a few things I've wanted. The type of phones I'm interested in are mainly the really early ones. I started out collecting everything like everyone, but it got a little bit out of hand, and my wife wanted one telephone to put on the wall, and it just went on from there. She probably regrets the day she asked me to find one for her, so I've decided to reduce it to a manageable size.
I've come over from Auckland, New Zealand for the weekend collectors meet, and I've been a member of this society for 9 or 10 years, and it's the second annual meeting that I've attended, and I value very much the friendship I'm getting from all the Australian collectors. I've specialised in the early skeletal and the Commonwealth Ericsson wall phones, making parts to the best of our ability exactly the way that they were made by Ericsson. This is a cradle from the early skeletal phones. We're made from brass, machined pieces and hand bent pieces, polished and then nickel plated. And these items have gone to Europe, England, and I can even say that the museums in Sweden have been very interested in these reproduction pieces for adding to repairing stuff for their collection. The other smaller parts are similarly made out of brass and machined to the original tolerances that Ericsson would have used. I brought along this little piece of memorabilia. I was there for the last telephone call, Great Barrier Island, New Zealand. This is a little island about 40 kilometres off the coast of Auckland. When I worked for Telecom, the community was served by manual phones, very similar to the Ericsson phones over there, 10 and 12 people sharing a party line with all the problems and the jokes we associate with everyone listening to everyone else's conversation. After I retired from Telecom, to help out collectors and friends in the collecting game, I started making the little small pieces which everyone needs and are essential to restoring old phones. Little teardrops made out of brass, little brass pegs and small items which we produce from home in a little home workshop. It's a labour of love and helps out fellow collectors restoring old phones. Thank you very much.
Telephone collecting, as far as I'm concerned, probably goes back to from being involved as a trainee with PMG in the 1950s, and it's one of those things, I guess, that once it gets into your blood, you just continue to like the things that you learned in the early days. So that's the case with me anyway. Bakelite restoration is probably one of the easier materials to restore, whether it be telephones or radios, it doesn't really matter. The prime thing is to get the Bakelite very clean using a solution of mild dishwashing liquid and water, a thorough cleaning with terps. Terps being a solvent will remove any grease and grime. The follow-up to that is to polish with a car polish, which is reasonable cutting compound, and that will get the Bakelite to a very clean state. Following that, it should be polished with a repo type polish, liquid polish, and the Bakelite will come up to its original shiny gloss appearance. All these phones and radios have been cleaned that way, and find that they've come up reasonably well.
My name's Arthur Challoner, and these two tables here, that's my display. Well, you can see here the collection. I have no favourite phone, but I used to do country work for about 15 years, and when I was in the country, I used to get the phones. I spend hours in restoration. It doesn't mean when people say they have nothing to do. I do it and I enjoy it, and I do most of the woodwork. Now this one here, that one there, I made that one from that photo. Now that's the photo and I made that one up. I make up the patterns, then I get them cast, and then I turn them, get them nickeled, and enjoy looking at them when I finished. This one here, I found that part there, then I made it up, made the casting, made the feet, and I made it up the Eiffel Tower. Now this one here, the Bertha and Adder, when I got that, it was in pieces, there was no cover, sent over to America to George Eck, and that's an original cover, and he sent that over, and we exchanged, and that's how I got that. Now you'll see on the top here the different coloured insulators, the mauve, the green. Now this one here is a rare one. That's been from Adelaide to Port Pirie on the early telegraph line. This one here is a fully restored Ericsson, and I found out just a while ago this intercom here, it's around about the 1890s, this one, the little one. This one here is the penny one. With the pennies you press the button there and the 4 pennies drop in. When you spoke to the girl at the exchange, she'd say, well, press the button, you'd press the button and down go the 4 pennies.
I'm one of the early phone collectors in this group here today. I started the society in the early mid-70s, and my main aim in phone collecting was Ericsson telephones. And as you can see here, I have a number of early Ericsson phones, ranging from the early 1880s through to about 1910. The biscuit barrel is one of those phones that most collectors would like to get their hands on, and a few people have decided to actually make them. So parts are actually something that people in the end have to produce if they wish to complete phones. And this phone up here is actually one that's had a number of alterations. A little piece here has been produced and a piece underneath. And this has to be undertaken in order to make phones look their best. One interesting phone was this Spider phone that I picked up while I was overseas in the United States. And I happened on it by accident in a antique shop. Dates from 1904. It's a central battery telephone. It was predominantly used in Europe. I know for certain it was used in Holland, and certainly used in Copenhagen and Sweden as well. I was lucky enough to find this in the United States. Okay.
Yeah, my name's Ron Langhans from the Sydney branch of the Historical Radio Society, and the main interest in our area is the electronic side of radios and broadcasting, and even back as far as telegraph. The idea of this display is really to give people an idea of what radio consisted of from the early 1920s right through to the current times, and it is a great interest. We have about 150 members in Sydney who collect anything from World War I sets through to microphones. There's a few examples here. We also collect telegraph equipment. We collect, well, they even go as far as gramophones, radios. You've got radios of the 1925s. We got the general era of radio and its history. Broadcasting even goes as far as TV, but the biggest trouble with TVs are they're too large, so there are not many collectors of TV sets. But in general, if you wish to contact us, we hold meetings 4 times a year, and we actually at those meetings have club auctions where we exchange goods. One person's rubbish is someone else's treasures, and as such you end up with equipment like this, which allows you to expand and increase your collection.
Right, my name is Ian O'Toole, and I'm a member of the HRSA, the Historical Radio Society of Australia. My particular speciality is collecting military radio equipment, of which I have several pieces on display here. My idea in coming here today to the Telephone Collectors Society display was to see if I could find any other people who had radio gear that they were prepared to donate or give to the collection. I've been collecting for around 30 years and have my own private museum of military radio equipment. There are lots of other collectors of this in the Historical Radio Society of Australia, and it's just another one of the facets of radio collecting. My aim is to restore the gear, get it back into working condition. To do that, you have to collect sometimes 10 different sets just to end up with enough pieces to make one. What I have on display here today is basically what you end up with after 30 years of collecting. It's quite an arduous task, but it's a great hobby.
Alan Stuckey here. I've been collecting telephones since 1942. I bought a Kellogg a candlestick phone from a man called Alex Toyne in Elizabeth Street, Redfern, for 12 and sixpence. And ever since then I've been collecting telephones. Due to the large variety and types of telephones, I've had to specialise in a particular type, so I've decided to collect all black phones. And this is only a small selection of what I've got. I've got some 150 to 200 telephones black, and I am at the moment still trying to improve, and I'm minus about 3 or 4 of this collection right up to the last lot of phones, which is the 800 series phones. Siemens phone, 1928-1930, the first of the Bakelite telephones. Many millions of them manufactured overseas and copied by Amalgamated Wireless Australia in the 1930s. A very good phone, much sought after, and if you have one at home, hang on to it. You will be able to pass it on as an inheritance to your family. I strongly think that anyone who likes hobbies should join the Telephone Collectors Society. They're a great team of people. I've only been a member of about 4 odd years, and it's a great hobby, and you meet lots of people, and they're great people to do with.